Hi everyone, welcome to Blooming with BC NCMHCE test prep. Today I am going to walk through the slides that I shared during our study hall Saturdays, just so that if you haven't had a chance to join us live, you can hear me break down some of those tips, the things that you see on Saturdays and the Saturday study tips on our Facebook group, and kind of get to verbally hear and break it down easier for those of you who are auditory learners, and just to have a place for you all to refer back to in case you do want to refresh your memory. So if you've never been to study hall is 2 hours. I alternate between morning study halls and evening study halls. But essentially, it's a chance for you to get some accountability of studying with other people, hear some test tips from me, kind of hear some of the other questions people may be asking. Sometimes you all have your own tips and techniques that you found helpful. And you can also ask us questions that you may have about the specific things that you're studying. So maybe it's a certain theory you're working on, or this counselor attribute keeps stumping you. Maybe some differential disorders are tripping you up. Whatever it is, you are also welcome to ask those in our study hall sessions. For those of you who don't know me, my name is BC. I am a Florida licensed mental health counselor. I do also still do therapy sessions. And so with those clients, I specialize in women of color, Christian women, racial trauma, and faith related trauma. Really just helping women learn to stop defaulting to putting others first and start to prioritize their own needs, get a better sense of their identity, and show up more authentically in life. I took the NCMHCE a year and a half, I should say, after graduating. I did take the newer version. However, I will say I'm finding that it's more helpful to take this exam closer to graduation than to wait and try to get field experience. And I say that because for a lot of this test, you kind of have to take off your therapist hat and put back on your student hat and go back to doing things by the book, making sure you're hitting every single step and not um, defaulting to certain things or making assumptions that certain things are covered. This test is very literal. They very much care about the steps and the orders, even the things that seasoned therapists may know to automatically do with someone. They want you to go ahead and tell them to do those things. So the closer you can take this to graduation, the better. I passed the NCMHCE on May 31st of 2023. That was my first attempt taking it. In the fullest sense of transparency, I attempted, or I should say intended, to start studying Black Friday of 2022. That was when I first got my counseling exam subscription, and I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it for that whole 3-month subscription I bought. I procrastinated. I doubted myself. I avoided it as much as possible. I decided to try again in March of 2023, bought another subscription, and I procrastinated again. And it was about 6 weeks before my test before I actually decided to be serious. I'd pay for my tests. I needed to at least give myself a fighting chance by actually studying. I would not recommend trying to prepare for this test in 6 weeks, but it is doable and proof that it's capable. But I was kicking myself those whole 6 weeks for procrastinating and really wishing I had given myself more time. I only use Counseling Exam to prepare for this test. I am not sponsored by them. They do not pay me to recommend them, but I'm from the part of Florida where counseling exams started. So I always heard from teachers, other therapists, my supervisor, colleagues of how helpful counselingexam.com was. And so I went for it. It was all I used. I maybe opened my DSM a couple of times for some of those differential diagnoses, But really, counseling exam was all I used, and I do highly recommend them. I know there are other resources, but I just don't have firsthand experience with them, and I wouldn't want to recommend something I wasn't personally familiar with. And since passing my test, I have started offering tutoring services. I do one-to-one tutoring sessions, small group tutoring sessions, the virtual study halls like this one. I have a free Facebook group that's open to anyone. And I have some study guides and books coming out soon to help people continue to prepare for their exam. For those of you who are wondering where to start when it comes to studying, this slide is for you. I will highly, and I'm big on repetition, so you'll hear me say a lot of this often, but I highly encourage you to prioritize those theories and disorders. Theories alone make up 30% of this exam. There are so many theories out there, and I know it can be a lot, but you really have to have a foundational understanding of those theories. Disorders makes up 25%. So those two alone are the biggest domains on this exam. Please make sure you are investing a lot of time in knowing them well. After that, I would then say work on those narratives and practice exams. So I like to call them quizzes and full exams. A narrative is one client. It's about 10 to 15 questions per client, per narrative, I should say. The full exams, the practice exams, that's the full 3 hours and some change, multiple narratives or clients, back to back to back. You don't get to see any of the answers until you're completely finished. You want to invest time in doing them, not only be familiar with the setup and the format of the exam, but to also build stamina. This is a long test. It is a lot of reading. You want to know the content just as much as you want to know how to apply it for this exam. Let those narratives and exams guide what other areas you go into. For example, on counseling exam, if you are not in exam mode, it shows you right at the top of the question which of the domains that question falls under. And so if you find like, oh, I keep messing up on these counselor attribute questions, okay, go to that tab. Look through the different sections on that tab and look for ones that speak to you personally as you needing to work on. For example, unconditional positive regard is not something I need to spend too much time researching. I'm really big on person-centered therapy. I'm very familiar with that Rogerian approach of unconditional positive regard. However, for me, I still struggle with reflection of meaning versus reflection of feeling versus reflection of content. I had to review that multiple times, but instead of covering all of the counselor attributes, I focused on what I personally needed. And that's also part of what we do in tutoring is I'm helping you pick out what are the specific areas to you so that you can better guide your study time. And so please don't feel like you need to cover everything, but do check in with yourselves to see what you do need to work on. I like to say to gauge whether you're ready to take the real exam, you should be getting scores in the 70s consistently on the full exam and narratives. We don't need 100 on this exam. We are not killing ourselves for that. But I do like to say to aim for the 70s because it gives you a buffer. The lowest passing score I've seen has been a 59 and the highest is 66. The NBCC says that they are those variables in the passing score, and that the lower the passing score, the harder that exam tends to be, the higher the passing score, the easier. By aiming for the 70s, it gives you a cushion so that no matter which version you get, you're practicing to aim higher than that. When studying the theories, you want to be looking for 5 things. And like I said, theories are big, they're dense, there's a lot of them. So by breaking it down to 5 things to be keeping in mind, it makes it so much more manageable. The first thing to be looking for is the why. Why are we doing this? What's the objective, the main idea, the goal? What are we hoping to do with this client? What are they hoping to reach? Different theories target different things, and so it's important to know when could a theory be helpful for the. Also want to be thinking about the founder or founders of the theory. Sometimes it's an organization, sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's more than one. But at times you will see the exam refer to the theory not by its name, but by the name of the founders. And so please be prepared for that as well. The third thing to keep in mind is what techniques go with that theory. You will find that a lot of theories seem similar, but their approaches are a little bit different. So please make sure that if a theory has a certain way of doing something and they have a certain name for it, that you know that. And not only the name, but what does that technique actually do? What is it targeting, or what is the treatment objective if we want to get more clinical? But basically saying, why would you do this technique? How are you trying to help the client in this moment? Because sometimes the answer choice will be the name, other times it will be the definition. And there are some techniques that the world outside of psychology and mental health have become aware of and may have kind of redefined. So you want to make sure that when you see a term and it sounds familiar, you're not automatically thinking about how it's maybe colloquially used, but more so what's the actual clinical target objective for this technique and for this specific theory, because sometimes theories will use the same techniques, but use it in a different way. And so please be paying attention to that as well. We'll also want to take note to how does this therapist interact with the theory? How do they show up in the therapy room? I personally like to think of the theories as a spectrum. I would say person-centered is on one end and CBT is all the way at the other. A person-centered therapist is non-direct. They're there, they're present, they're engaging, they're showing empathy, but they're not confronting, they're not challenging, they're not getting the client to think of different perspectives, they're not leading the client in any direction. The client is very much guiding the car of therapy in this instance. That is very much the opposite for CBT. In CBT, it is very direct. The therapist is in charge. They will have a lot of techniques going on. There will be times when they will be kind of playing devil's advocate at times. Like they are very direct in their approaches. I like to think that the other theories fall somewhere within that spectrum. A lot of the other behavior therapies, very similar to CBT, much more direct, much more engaging, much more therapist-led. But there are other theories where it's the client who's taking charge, the client who's the one who kind of guides the way the conversation is going. By thinking about the theories in that context, it can make it easier for you to rule out some of the answer choices when the exam is giving you answers that sound good, but may not match up with the specific approach they're asking you to use in that moment. And finally, you want to take notes of what disorder or dynamics is the theory helpful for. For example, DBT was created for borderline personality disorder. That was very much in mind when it was created, and that's typically when you will see DBT being used. It has expanded to other diagnoses, but it was intended for borderline personality disorder. There are other theories that are more so helpful with dynamics, like anger management, meaning making, career choices, grief. And so keeping in mind when a theory could be helpful will make navigating this exam a lot easier. Here's where we go when we're studying diagnoses. Diagnosis studying is a lot more objective. It's kind of more yes or no correct answers. You don't have to conceptualize things as much. It's kind of closer to memorizing when it comes to the disorders because there are so many set things we have to keep in mind. To start, I like to say take note of the duration criteria for symptoms. For example, a manic episode, 7 days or more is the general criteria for what that looks like. For a hypomanic episode, it's 4 to less than 7 days. Those two have duration as a clear separator between them. And there are many other diagnoses that have that duration criteria for their symptoms as well. You also want to take note of how many symptoms are occurring. You don't really need to know the exact number, but when you're reading and when you're kind of studying, you want to say, oh, okay, well, is there one symptom that really defines this as that disorder? Or do there need to be multiple things going on before I can officially say, okay, this is what it is. You also want to know the definitions for the different symptoms. This is especially true with the psychotic features disorders. Some of those symptoms are very clinical, or they have their own names for what's going on. So they have their own names for the different kinds of speech patterns that may present, or the different kinds of delusions and hallucinations. So make sure you know what the official names for those are, because they don't always give you context clues within the narrative. And please make sure to be familiar with differential diagnoses. The exam will give you a provisional diagnosis, but provisional is the key word. You want to be reading the narrative to confirm or deny whether that is the official diagnosis for the client or the best fit. This is because sometimes they may ask you, why did you decide to pick this diagnosis? And it'll give you answer choices that have list of symptoms. And sometimes those symptoms will be overlapping with other diagnoses. Sometimes they may ask you why you picked this one over a differential. Other times they may straight up say the provisional diagnosis was incorrect. What should it be instead? So knowing how to tell the difference between those similar diagnoses will help you a lot. Here's where we go when reading a narrative. If you don't take away anything else from this video besides this slide, I'm okay with that. But this one is something you really want to be keeping in mind. I like to say when you're reading a narrative, there are 5 things to keep in mind. And my tutoring clients will tell you, I say this all the time. I encourage them to write it on their scrap paper as soon as they sit down to take their test. These are the 5 things to really, really hear my voice saying in your head while you're preparing for this test. The first thing is to look for what's measurable. That can be things like frequencies, amounts, lengths of time. So that could be something like a few months, 11 years old, the past 3 weeks, whatever it is. If it's measurable or quantifiable, you want to keep note of that because, again, that can help with the diagnostic criteria. The second thing you want to be looking for is what symptoms or behaviors are currently occurring. Are they struggling sleeping? Are they being impulsive? Are they anxious? Are they withdrawn? Just kind of an idea of what is this client currently experiencing. The third thing is to think about who or what else is being impacted besides the client. This can be things like family members, friends, coworkers, work, school, homework, but it'll help you see the effects of what's going on outside of just the client that's in front of you. And again, this can help with diagnosing because with things like mood disorders or personality disorders, you will see a pretty widespread impact in the things and people around them. These next 2 things are easier to look for in the following session. So not necessarily in the first session, but any session after that, you can look for these next 2 things. The fourth thing is looking for any changes of behavior from the previous session to now. What's different, positive, negative, or brand new? You just want to see what's happening right now. And the final thing to be looking for is what session number are you currently on? In session 1, when you're just building rapport, you're getting to know the client, probably isn't the time for you to go confronting or challenging them. But as more time has passed and you're starting to develop a deeper bond with them, it would be more appropriate to kind of point out some of those discrepancies. Again, this test is very timeline oriented. And so they'll ask you things like, what should you do first? Or what should you do now? And thinking about it in context of the length of time for the relationship with the client, that could help you better answer a lot of those questions. When answering the questions, there are some things to keep in mind as well. For one, you want to put the questions into your own words to make sure you really understand it. Sometimes I feel like this test grabs a dictionary and kind of just throws the biggest words they can find into these questions. So if it's long worded, if it's dense or it's heavy, or you're kind of just confused, that is the opportunity for you to see if putting it into your own words helps you get a better understanding of what they're actually asking. I also encourage you to try to narrow down the answer choices without going back to read the narrative first. I find often that people will read the questions and then immediately go looking in the narrative to see if it's there, without even giving themselves a chance to see if they know the answer. And because this test is timed, that could really eat away into the time you have left very quickly. If you have gotten to a point where you have narrowed down your answer choices and you're stuck between two of them, that is when I would say to respond as if it was a real client of yours. I would only do this if you have already narrowed down the answer choices and you're stumped. I wouldn't default to doing this because, like I said earlier, with this exam, you do want to put back on a student hat. Sometimes, because of your experience with certain things, you may miss recording or saying to do certain steps because it is so second nature for you. But you really want to slow down with this test. And when you're stumped, that's when you can go back to your experience to see if that can get you out of that pickle. And please, 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 please go with your gut. So often I see my clients go back and forth between an answer choice, and the one that they first wanted to go with was right, but they talked themselves out of it. My clients will tell you, if I see them doing it, I will call them out. Like if I see you back and forth between certain answers, I will say, trust yourself, go with your gut, go for it, because I won't be there with you on test day. You will. And so it's important to not let this test be the reason you're second guessing yourself. And I will also say, please only change your answer if you realize you read the question incorrectly. There is an opportunity to review your answers between sessions on the exam. Only click review all if it says unanswered or not answered. Please don't change your answers based off of the following questions, because sometimes they do that to throw you off and give you questions that make it seem like your previous answer was incorrect. But you need to be answering the question with the information you have in that moment. They're not asking you, they're not wanting you to get some future information and then try to go back and change it. No, because in real life, you can't see the future either. You have to go off of the information that's presented to you in the moment. And if you're ever at a point where you're not sure what the answer is, please make your best guess and click something instead of leaving it blank. You no longer get penalized for answering incorrectly, and so you might as well go for it and try to earn an extra point. A big part of this test is recognizing patterns and knowing test strategies. Some of these patterns show up in the ways that they're wording the questions. I like to say there are keywords that will show up regularly that you want to keep an eye out for, and those keywords will be targeting something in the question to help you stay focused. Some of those keywords include best and most. Two of my least favorite are the keywords, and probably yours too if you've already been preparing for this test. Best and most tell you that 3 out of 4, sometimes 4 out of 4 of these answers will sound good. And so you want to be looking for the answer that hits the target most directly. Sometimes it's looking for something very specific. Sometimes it's looking for something more general, but paying attention to the target will help you be able to answer that question in the way they're looking for. I also like to say that least is the annoying cousin of best and most. Least will also have 3 answers that sound related. However, if you miss the word least, you may answer incorrectly. There are also times where there's all 4 answer choices that sound like things you may want to go with. So when it comes to least questions in those instances, I like to say, think about the option that it would be okay if you couldn't get to in the next session or in the next few sessions. It's usually not the highest priority. And so if it would be okay to not focus on that, it's usually the correct answer. And then we have the keyword of not. Not is frustrating because it's so little. And if not is in a question where it's got a lot of sentence or one of those paragraph of a question, it can get pretty easy to forget that the word not was there. So when you have a question that has the word not, double check your answer. And I mean double check by make sure you read the question correctly. Not double check as in second guess yourself, but just double check, okay, did I answer what I should not do or what I am not looking for? Or did I accidentally forget that part and pick something that could be helpful? First and next play into that linear aspect of this test. I like to think of it as the old grade school assignment of writing down the instructions for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And sometimes you would lose points because you forgot to tell the teacher to open the refrigerator door. And in your head, you're be like, of course you have to open the refrigerator. Where are you gonna get the jelly? It's in the refrigerator. And the teacher would go, but you didn't tell me to do that. This is the same with the test. We may accidentally assume that, of course, we did that step, but the test is literal. They're very focused on order of operations. And so if they're asking you to do something first, break it down that literally like you would for that peanut butter and jelly assignment. Always, never, only, and except are also words you want to be paying very careful attention to. If you were to read the answer choices for one of these questions, and there's something in that answer choice that doesn't sit right or doesn't meet that criteria, it is not what they're looking for. Please read closely for those and make sure that that qualifier of always, never, only, or except is true in your answer choice. I always end a study hall session with the invitation to reach out if you would like to work with me. For one-to-one tutoring sessions, it is $35 per session, but the first session is $50. That includes the theory study guide. If you have more than 6 weeks before your test, it also includes a free personalized study calendar. And we will go over your study style and get a chance for me to see where you may have some strengths or some weaknesses when it comes to this exam. You also offer small group tutoring sessions. This is capped at 4 people. It's $30 per person per group session. But if you've got some friends or coworkers who are also preparing for the test and you would like to study together but need some extra support, you are able to do that with my group tutoring sessions. And I have my free Facebook group that is NCMHCE Tutoring and Support Group. It is free, even if you're not one of my tutoring clients. We would love to have you join us there if you're on Facebook. And we also have free virtual study halls twice a month. And I alternate between Saturday mornings and Saturday evenings to give our West Coast friends a fair chance at not having to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to join a session. But in the first half of those, I will go over this PowerPoint to give people a chance to ask some questions about those different sections. And then we'll finish it off by doing a narrative together. And you can find the dates for those on my website, www.bloomingwithbc.com/NCMHCE tutoring. If you have any extra questions or there's something that you just need a deeper breakdown of, please leave a comment, message me, or email me, and I would love to give you some more clarity on how to better prepare for this exam. I'll see you soon. Bye.